The schoolyard buzzed with nervous anticipation as the crowd gathered near the assembly ground, their murmurs rising like the hum of restless bees. It wasn't a typical day. Something was about to happen, something none of them had ever imagined. A lone figure stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow under the glaring sun. He reached up to the heavy black helmet that had been his signature for as long as anyone could remember. "Is he really going to take it off?" someone whispered. "I don't believe it," another replied, clutching her friend's arm. The boy's hands hovered over the helmet's straps for a moment, then slowly began to unbuckle them. The crowd edged closer, their breath caught in their throats. For years his face had been a mystery, hidden behind the glossy shield of the helmet. Rumors had swirled. Some said he was horribly disfigured, others claimed he was hiding a secret identity. But now the truth was just moments away. As the straps came undone, the crowd surged forward, the anticipation almost unbearable. The boy hesitated, his fingers gripping the edge of the helmet, then, with one fluid motion, he lifted it off. Gasps rippled through the assembly like a wave. The scene froze in everyone's mind, a face so striking, so impossibly handsome that it felt like time had stopped. His smooth, flawless skin seemed to glow in the sunlight, and his sharp features were like something out of a dream. His piercing eyes scanned the crowd, and for a moment no one could move or speak. But to understand how it came to this moment, you'd have to go back to the beginning. Michael wasn't like the other boys at St. Gabriel's Secondary School. From the day he transferred in as a junior, he had been an enigma. On his very first day, he walked into the classroom wearing a motorcycle helmet, his uniform perfectly ironed and his posture impeccable. The class erupted into laughter, and some of the boys jeered at him, but Michael didn't flinch. He calmly took a seat in the back row, his helmet glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Why are you wearing that thing?" Cheek, the class clown, had asked, leaning over Michael's desk. Michael didn't respond. He simply opened his notebook and began writing, as though Cheek didn't exist. It didn't take long for the rumors to start. Some said he had a terrible skin condition and was ashamed of his face. Others claimed he had been in a horrible accident and was hiding scars. The more outlandish theories painted him as a criminal on the run or a secret agent in disguise. But the truth was far simpler and far more surprising. Michael wasn't hiding anything ugly. In fact, he was hiding something beautiful. Before moving to St. Gabriel's, Michael had attended another school where his looks had caused chaos. Girls followed him in groups, passing him love notes during class and waiting outside his house after school. He couldn't walk down the hallway without someone trying to touch his hair or steal a photo of him. It was exhausting, and it made focusing on his studies nearly impossible. Michael had always been determined to excel academically. He had big dreams, becoming an engineer, traveling the world, and making a difference. He didn't have time for distractions, and his looks were proving to be the biggest distraction of all. So when he transferred to St. Gabriel's, he made a decision. He would wear a helmet every day to conceal his face. It was a drastic measure, but it worked. The teasing he endured from the boys was nothing compared to the chaos he had left behind. For months, the helmet became his shield, his fortress. The girls at St. Gabriel's didn't even bother with him, assuming he was unattractive under the helmet. Some even pitied him, while others avoided him altogether. But there were a few who were curious. Among them was Ada, a bright and outspoken girl who had a reputation for challenging authority. She found Michael fascinating, not because of his helmet, but because of his intelligence and composure. She often noticed how he aced every test and carried himself with a quiet confidence. One afternoon during a group project, Ada found herself paired with Michael. "You're really serious about this helmet thing, huh?" she asked as they worked on a physics experiment. Michael chuckled softly. "You could say that." "You know, people talk about you a lot," Ada continued, trying to gauge his reaction. "I'm sure they do," he replied, not looking up from his calculations. "Doesn't it bother you?" He finally looked at her, his expression calm. "Not really. People will always talk. It's what they do." Ada didn't press further, but her curiosity only grew. She started paying more attention to him, watching how he interacted with others and noticing the small things. like how he always helped his classmates quietly without drawing attention to himself. Meanwhile, the rest of the school continued to speculate. The boys tried to come up with pranks to force Michael to remove the helmet, but he was always one step ahead, avoiding their traps with ease. The girls, on the other hand, mostly ignored him, except for a few who whispered about how mysterious he was. Then came the day of the inter-house sports competition. Michael had reluctantly joined the Blue House football team, and when he stepped onto the field wearing his helmet, the entire school erupted into laughter. "He can't be serious," Cheek shouted from the sidelines. But Michael didn't let it faze him. He played brilliantly, scoring goal after goal and leading his team to victory. By the end of the match, the laughter had turned into cheers. Still, the helmet stayed on. And then came the day of the assembly, the day Michael decided it was time to show the school who he really was. As the assembly hall buzzed with energy, every student craned their necks to get a better view of Michael. The air felt thick with tension, the kind of suspense that made time seem to drag. For months, Michael had been an enigma wrapped in that impenetrable helmet, and now he stood at the center of attention. The school principal, Mr. Okafor, was at the podium, trying to restore order to the restless crowd. But his attempts to shush the students were futile. All eyes were locked on Michael. Michael, for his part, remained calm. His posture was relaxed, his hands gripping the helmet's sides as if bracing himself for a storm. And yet a faint smile tugged at his lips, a subtle confidence that only heightened the intrigue. "I never thought this day would come," Cheek muttered to Ada, who was sitting beside him. "Maybe he's doing this to prove a point," Ada replied, her eyes glued to Michael. The principal finally gave up trying to quiet the students and stepped aside, motioning for Michael to take the stage. "All right, Michael," Mr. Okafor said, his voice amplified by the microphone. "The floor is yours." Michael nodded and stepped forward, his helmet catching the glare of the stage lights. He took a deep breath, his voice calm and steady as he addressed the crowd. "You've all wondered why I wear this helmet," he began, his voice resonating through the hall. "And I understand. It's not every day you see someone walking around like this." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, but Michael's serious expression quickly silenced it. "I wore this helmet to escape something I didn't know how to handle," he continued. "Back at my old school, my appearance caused more problems than I could manage. The attention, the distractions, it became unbearable. All I wanted was to focus on my studies, but I couldn't. So when I transferred here, I made a choice. I decided to hide my face so I could have peace." The hall was dead silent now. Even the rowdiest students were hanging on to his every word. "But over time," Michael said, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, "I realized something important. Hiding doesn't solve anything. It only creates more questions, more distance. So today I'm removing this helmet, not because I owe anyone an explanation, but because I'm ready to embrace who I am." With that, Michael lifted the helmet once more. This time he didn't hesitate. The crowd held its breath as the helmet came off, revealing his face in its entirety. The reaction was immediate. Gasps filled the hall, followed by a stunned silence. Michael's face was flawless. His sharp jawline, smooth dark skin and piercing eyes made him look like he had stepped out of a magazine. His hair, neatly cut and well-maintained, framed his face perfectly. He exuded an effortless charm that left everyone speechless. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then the silence was broken by a wave of murmurs. "He's so handsome," someone whispered. "Why would he hide that face?" another voice added. Michael stood tall, his face calm and composed as the whispers grew louder. Ada, who had been sitting quietly in the crowd, felt her heart race. She had suspected Michael was hiding something significant, but even she hadn't expected this. Chaik, for the first time in his life, was at a loss for words. He sat frozen, his mouth slightly open as he stared at Michael. The principal, recovering from his own shock, stepped forward and patted Michael on the shoulder. "Well," he said with a nervous chuckle, "that was certainly unexpected. Let's give Michael a round of applause for his honesty." The hall erupted into cheers and applause, but Michael wasn't finished. "I want you all to know something," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. This isn't about looks. It's about the way we judge people without truly knowing them. For months, many of you assumed the worst about me because of this helmet. Some of you laughed at me, others pitied me. But none of you bothered to ask why I wore it. And that says more about us as a society than it does about me. His words hit home, and the applause faltered as the students reflected on their behavior. I'm not angry, Michael continued. I understand why you acted the way you did, but I hope this teaches us all a lesson. Never judge someone based on what you see or don't see. Take the time to understand them. You might be surprised by what you find. The hall was silent again, but this time it was a silence of respect. As Michael stepped down from the stage, the students parted to let him pass, their gazes filled with a mix of admiration and guilt. Ada was the first to approach him, her expression unreadable. That was brave, she said finally. Michael smiled. Thanks. I figured it was time. Ada hesitated, then added, You've always been more than your looks, you know. The helmet didn't hide that. Michael's smile widened. Coming from you, that means a lot. Over the following weeks, Michael became something of a legend at St. Gabriel's. The teasing stopped, replaced by genuine admiration. He joined the debate team, led the school to victory in academic competitions, and even made friends with those who had once mocked him. But the most remarkable change was in the students themselves. Michael's actions had challenged them to look beyond appearances and see people for who they truly were. And as for Michael, he no longer needed the helmet. He had found his peace, and with it, the courage to be unapologetically himself. Michael's newfound confidence didn't just change the way his classmates saw him, it also changed how he saw himself. He walked the halls of St. Gabriel's Secondary School with a quiet assurance, no longer hiding behind the helmet that had once been his shield. But his decision to reveal his face came with its own set of challenges. As much as many admired him, others couldn't help but obsess over his looks. Girls who had once dismissed him now found excuses to talk to him, giggling nervously as they stumbled over their words. Michael, do you need help with your notes? One girl asked, holding out her notebook, even though Michael had his own perfectly organized stack. Michael, are you coming to the library later? I can save you a seat. Another chimed in, her cheeks flushed. Even the teachers seemed to treat him differently. Mrs. Okoro, the strict English teacher known for her no-nonsense attitude, suddenly started calling on him more often in class, smiling warmly whenever he answered correctly, which was almost every time. Michael took it all in stride, but deep down he was growing uneasy. He had gone from being invisible to being the center of attention. And while part of him appreciated the respect, another part of him felt like he was being reduced to his appearance all over again. Ada, however, remained her usual self. She didn't treat him any differently, and Michael found himself gravitating toward her more and more. She was one of the few people who had seen him for who he truly was, even before the helmet came off. One afternoon, as they sat under the large mango tree in the schoolyard, Ada turned to him with a curious expression. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Regret what? Michael replied, though he already knew what she meant. Taking off the helmet, it feels like things have gotten complicated since then. Michael leaned back against the tree trunk, his eyes fixed on the clear blue sky. Sometimes, he admitted, it's ironic, isn't it? I wore the helmet to escape the attention, and now I've ended up with even more of it. Ada nodded thoughtfully. People are drawn to what they don't understand. First, it was the mystery of the helmet. Now it's your face. Michael chuckled. I guess I can't win. Ada gave him a playful nudge. Don't be so dramatic. You've inspired a lot of people, you know. Even Cheek's been nicer lately. That's a miracle in itself. Michael laughed, but Ada's words stayed with him. Could he use this newfound attention to make a difference? Could he turn the obsession with his looks into something meaningful? The opportunity came sooner than he expected. A few weeks later, the school announced its annual talent show, an event where students showcased their skills in music, drama, poetry, and more. Michael had never participated before, but this time he felt compelled to step forward. He wanted to use the platform to share his story and challenge the way people thought about beauty, identity, and self-worth. When the day of the talent show arrived, the auditorium was packed. Excitement buzzed in the air as students performed one after another, singing, dancing, and reciting poetry. Finally, it was Michael's turn. As he stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Everyone was eager to see what he would do. "I'm not here to sing or dance," Michael began, his voice steady as he looked out at the crowd. "I'm here to tell you a story. My story." He spoke about his struggles at his old school, the overwhelming attention his looks had brought, and the decision to wear the helmet to escape it all. He talked about how wearing the helmet had taught him to see beyond appearances, not just in himself, but in others. "Beauty is powerful," he said, his voice rising with emotion, "but it can also be a curse if that's all people see. We're so much more than what's on the surface. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Look deeper. See people for who they are, not just for what they look like." The audience erupted into applause, many students on their feet, clapping and cheering. Even Cheek, who rarely took anything seriously, stood up and gave Michael a thumbs up. After the show, Michael was approached by dozens of students, each thanking him for his words and sharing how they had been inspired by his story. One boy admitted he had always felt invisible because he didn't think he was attractive enough. A girl tearfully confessed that she had been bullied for her weight, and Michael's words had given her hope. But it was Ada's reaction that meant the most to him. As the crowd thinned out, she found him near the stage, her eyes shining with pride. "You were amazing," she said simply. Michael smiled. "I had a good friend who reminded me I'm more than my looks. I guess I wanted everyone else to know that too." Ada laughed. "Well, mission accomplished, but don't let it get to your head." "I wouldn't dream of it," Michael replied with a grin. The talent show marked a turning point for Michael. He continued to excel in his studies and became a mentor to other students, using his story to encourage them to embrace their individuality and value what truly mattered. But the story doesn't end here. Michael's journey is far from over, and as he steps into the next chapter of his life, new challenges and opportunities await. The weeks after the talent show passed in a whirlwind of accomplishments and challenges. Michael became more involved in school life, leading student organizations and helping to organize events that promoted inclusivity and self-acceptance. His presence became a source of inspiration for many, but it also brought unexpected attention from outside the school community. One evening, after a particularly grueling study session in the library, Michael was approached by a journalist from a local newspaper. She had heard about his story and wanted to feature him in a feature about overcoming adversity and promoting self-worth. "I've never been interested in the spotlight," Michael admitted, sitting quietly as the journalist set up her recording equipment. "But if my story can help even one person, I'm happy to share it." The interview went smoothly, and Michael shared more about his journey, the pressures of being seen as more than just his appearance, the personal growth that came with it, and his hopes for the future. The story was published, reaching a wider audience than he ever imagined. The feedback was overwhelming. Messages poured in from students across the country who felt inspired by Michael's journey. Some shared their own struggles, while others simply thanked him for showing them it was okay to be different. Amid the praise, however, there were still challenges. Michael found himself constantly navigating misconceptions. Some people admired him for his bravery, but others still treated him like a figurehead for beauty, reducing his contributions to his looks alone. It was frustrating, but Michael remained focused on his mission to inspire real change, not just superficial admiration. One day after a school assembly, a girl named Nena approached him. She had been particularly vocal in her support during his journey, but her expression was now troubled. "Michael," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I don't know if I can do it anymore. The pressure to be perfect, it's too much." Michael listened carefully, his gaze steady as he offered a reassuring smile. "No one's perfect, Nena, and perfection isn't what matters. What matters is how we handle the struggles, how we rise from them." Nena nodded slowly, wiping away a tear. "But everyone looks up to you now. They expect so much from me because of what you've done." Michael gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's why I'm here, to remind you that it's okay to be yourself, even if you're not perfect. Your journey is yours, just like mine is mine. You don't have to carry everyone's expectations on your shoulders." The conversation stayed with Nenena long after she left, and Michael continued to inspire more students to speak openly about their struggles. Slowly but surely, a culture of acceptance began to take root at St. Gabriel's, one that moved beyond mere admiration for appearances and focused on understanding, empathy, and resilience. As his final year of secondary school approached, Michael found himself looking beyond St. Gabriel's. His experiences had shaped him, and his dreams had evolved. He knew his purpose now: to be a voice for those who felt unseen, to continue breaking down barriers, and to create a world where no one felt the need to hide behind a helmet or anything else. On the day of his graduation, Michael stood on the stage not as someone hiding, but as someone proud to be exactly who he was. His journey had been long and filled with challenges, but it had led him to a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. As the crowd cheered, Michael took a deep breath, his heart swelling with gratitude and hope. He had come full circle, embracing his past, living in the present, and looking toward a future where acceptance and kindness would be the guiding lights. And with that, Michael's story ended and began anew.